Alright, time for another drawing video and some stories. So this one I've been particularly excited about, as I've used a reference image for this one of a drawing someone else did to try and get the angle down right on the kind of the motorcycle and perspective and such on it, because I struggle a lot with drawing gun mechanical stuff. So this is probably the first drawing video in which I really heavily incorporated using someone else's work as a reference. So as such, this is a drawing by wenfei, I think is how you say it. It's called Silver Owl. I'll have a link to their X account in the description if you want to go check out some of their other work. And obviously with it being sped up, it might be a little hard to see, but you'll see throughout kind of this video there'll be times where I'll go and look at the drawing, kind of zoom in and highlight what I'm kind of looking at there. This is I did this initially to try and kind of show what I'm looking for, since the cursor isn't seen when I'm drawing, so that way that you as the audience can see kind of what I'm looking at. But I think it ended up being very helpful because it also highlighted to me what I'm looking at as well, and so I put more thought into it and such. So yeah, so that should be quite interesting and kind of get a bit of an insight into what I'm looking at when I'm trying to learn something or other. So if you're wondering who this is that you're listening to, my name is Lacking a Name. I am the writer and artist and creator of Gnosis. And so Gnosis updates 3 times a week. If you like how this drawing turns out, we got a Patreon that you can go and support me on. That would be very well appreciated, and you can get this drawing. And we also have a special Patreon member drawing as well, if you want to go and you could pick that up. So yeah, I guess kind of let's get into the stories. I'm trying to find still trying to find a good flow on how to do kind of these introductions and lead into the stories. So if last month's story was all about playing video games, this month is obviously the kind of the counter to that. My parents very much didn't want us to be inside screen kids, so quite often we hear that, all right, screen's off, go outside and play. And so that there are a few interesting stories that came as a result of that. When we were younger, one of the houses we lived at had fruit trees in it. We had an apple tree and a cherry tree in it, in the backyard. And the apple tree was nice, as in it was very easy to climb. The bark on it was pretty smooth, so it wasn't too obnoxious on the hands and such. The cherry tree, on the other hand, that was very tough to climb. It had very rough bark, and it always had a bee's nest or a hornet's nest up in it. So we never climbed the cherry tree. One of the neighbor kids, he was a little older, didn't listen to us and decided he was going to climb up in the cherry tree, and he climbed right up into a bee's nest and got stung a couple times, fell down. My dad was home at that time and saw it happen, so he ran out, made some mud, and started slapping it on the bee stings and such. So just kind of remember him coming to bail out a kid that didn't listen about, no, you don't climb the cherry tree. Those fruit trees were great, as in people from the neighborhood, all our friends and such, would come with just massive kind of the I don't know what they're called, but they'd be like maybe like 5 gallon drums or something weird like that, maybe bigger. I don't know. Buckets and just fill it all the way up to the top of cherries. Um, People also come and get apples as well, and so that was always a lot of fun, just having all those cherries and apples and such. Kind of growing up for a good bit. Now there was another side effect of that, and that is that when fruit gets ripe and it isn't picked, it gets a little overripe and will fall and go bad on the ground, which means that our yard would have a lot of bad fruit in it. So this gave us something to play with. So there were a couple of things that we like to do with these old apples. We like to throw them at a chain link fence that was around our yard, because they would fly and try and get them stuck into the fence. Or if you were really good and could throw it really fast, you would throw it in and it would cut through. The fence would cut through it. So yeah, that's something that we would try to do. The neighbors didn't like it when we did it at their yards, because then they had a bunch of rotten apple pieces in their yard, so they weren't too thrilled about that. Another thing that we had was, we used to have, I think this one was another cherry tree, a second cherry tree, but it had done bad and had to be cut down, so we had just a stump there. And we like to put apples on it, take a plastic croquet mallet that we had, and smash them. And that was the whole game, was just executing rotten apples. So yeah, when you're like 5 or 6 or whatnot, these games can be entertaining for long periods of time, and make quite a mess. Another thing that we enjoyed doing, we had in that yard, was a sandbox that our parents had built, and so I don't know how big this sandbox was. It was, because it was made from part of the garden, to give kind of an idea of how big it was. I mean, it might have been like maybe 10 feet, 10 by 4 or something weird like that. It seemed massive as a kid, but as I've grown up, I'm sure it was a bit more reasonable. But we like to take the hose, set it up at one end of the sandbox, and make a little river of water that would flow all the way down to the other end, and then would gradually fill up. And I think one time we filled up the whole sandbox of water into a muddy mess. And I think we only did that once, because that's a lot of water. It takes a long time for that to happen. But yeah, I remember, just when we were kids, we liked to make little rivers and kind of, see which way the water would flow, dig out channels in it and such, and just make a nice little landscape. That there was some fun. And other stuff we had in that yard, like I said, we had a garden that our parents would grow vegetables in. I remember one year we put corn in it. And so we had like 2 rows of corn stalks. That was interesting. Often like zucchinis, pumpkins. I can't remember if we did squash. I think we've tried to do watermelons. Tomatoes were often a facet in there as well. And so just kind of, we weren't allowed to play in that part of the garden too much. Obviously, because they didn't want us ruining the vegetables. But kind of interesting. I don't want to say interesting, but when after the harvest season, the vegetables had kind of been picked and such that were good. We had to take out all the plants and kind of till up the soil and such. And so we were allowed to play in it then, help pull out all the all the dead plants, maybe squash the vegetables that weren't quite as good. I remember my dad, I'm not sure how often he did this, but he tried to take his motorcycle into the garden and do like a burnout to try and like mix up all the soil and the vegetables in there. So I remember him doing that a few times, so that was kind of interesting. We had a river rock that ran in front of kind of the garden and sandbox area. I'm not entirely sure why, but why that was there. And the only real memory I have of this river rock was we would play this game where we would hunt hornets. And so we'd get squirt guns. And that was a pretty good spot to get hornets because there wasn't grass that they could disappear into when you would hit them out of the air or on the rocks or whatnot. And they like to come and land on the rocks and will soak up heat from them. And so that was a pretty good spot to get hornets. Now, kind of moving further along in the yard, we then had this kind of grassy area that for a while we had like kind of like fern bushes or something like that. I'm not entirely sure what they were called. That were like kind of big column plants that went along our yard. Eventually, my parents took them out because the hornets love to nest in them. And the problem with that, aside from hornets stinging people, is I'm allergic to insect stings and bites. And so they could be very, very dangerous to me. So eventually they took them out. I don't know how many years they were there for. But I remember a couple of times of getting rid of the hornets, rather be from the cherry tree or these ferns and such. I remember watching my parents, I guess kind of to illustrate things a bit, our house was kind of like a split level, so we had a upstairs and a downstairs, but the doorway that you entered was right on the staircase level, so one staircase went down, one staircase went up. So we didn't really have a ground floor. We had a floor above the ground and a floor under the ground in that house. So, as a kid, watching my parents deal with the hornets, we were watching from the windows that were kind of, up above the ground. And so I'd be inside looking out the window, and they would have a small fire going, trying to smoke the hornets and stuff out of like the trees and the bushes and things. And so that was I just remember them doing that a few times, especially at night. Just being able to sit up in the window and watch kind of the fire glow. From the safety of the house where the hornets weren't going to get me. But like I said, eventually they took those out, and kind of in that same part of the yard they had a swing set that we could play on, and there was kind of like a bit of grass, and we could play like t-ball and other such games there. And I remember this part of the yard in particular. It seemed like there's one year that this happened, and maybe it was other years, I'm only remembering one, but we had dragonflies that were flying around in that part of the yard a lot and such. And so we wanted to catch them. Well, dragonflies are really hard to catch, and when they're flying around at essentially kind of a second story level, you're not going to get that with a bug's net. So my dad took a pole. I don't know how long it was, or what kind of pole it was, but took a pole, a coat hanger, bent it into a loop, taped that to the pole, and put a garbage bag kind of wrapped around it, so we had this long extended net that we could poke up into the air and try and catch dragonflies with. And we did. We caught a few dragonflies that way. So it's kind of like you poke it up there, wave it around, and when you think you've scooped one, you would slam it down on the ground as fast as you could to try and keep the dragonfly in there. And so that was kind of cool because you'd drop it down, and then you'd have to kind of walk up along the pole to see if it was in the bag or not. And if it was in the bag, it'd be buzzing around and like, oh, I got it. And so we caught a few dragonflies that way. So that was always kind of a cool experience to successfully do that. And another interesting part about that part of the yard was that was right where the kitchen window was. And so we had like just this big tall brick wall where the only window on that side of the house was a window from the kitchen and the dinner table. And there was a hole in the window screen that was, I don't know, like maybe like about the size of a $50, maybe a little larger. And one of the things we like to do as kids on pizza, when we had pizzas, we didn't like the crust, but we had 2 dogs back then. We had, I'm like 15 minutes into the story, and now I'm only mentioning the dogs. We had a Malamute Lab hybrid that we named Rush, who we liked him a lot. He was a very good dog. And later we got a Lab Springer mix that my brother he did like his chores and everything for a month to prove that he was responsible to own a pet. And the dog was a substitute for something else, which I'll get to that story in a bit. But he named the dog Ditto after his favorite Pokemon at the time. So we had Rush and Ditto, and we'd like to take our pizza crust and poke them through this little hole in the screen and feed them kind of at the base of the window. It's just like a little food dispensing system. And I'm assuming that they knew that's where the food was for the special pizza crust treats. But because it's they're dogs. If there's going to be food there, if there's food somewhere, they're going to find it and they're going to remember it. So that's just a kind of a fun thing as a kid to do. We had coming off. So like I said, what we had was ultimately like a second story or 2-story house. And so you couldn't go right out of the back door into the yard because there would just be a big drop there. So we had a big porch out there. And I don't know how big this porch was. That's a funny thing, being an adult from when you're a kid, just trying to remember how big everything really was or whatnot. But this porch was probably, maybe like 10 feet out, 10 by 10 or something weird like that. It was pretty decently sized. I don't think any house we've had since this one has had a porch that big. But yeah, we would go out there, and that's another area that sometimes we play on. Like we would throw like paper airplanes or stuff off it that we wanted to go far and travel. Sometimes it seems like remember this game. One of our parents would be up there and like blow bubbles or whatnot, and they would rain down on us. So that was fun. When my little sister, the writer, was born, they put in a gate at the top of the porch. So that way, if she somehow got out, she couldn't just fall down the stairs. Well, so this gate just remained there for quite a while. I think it might have still been there when we left. But my mom was in the kitchen one day, which was right near the, obviously the back door, when I say right near the back door. So kind of the back door to the porch was connected to the kitchen and the dining area with the hole in the screen that we would feed the dogs through. So this was all kind of in the back corner of the house. And so she's in the kitchen doing some dishes or something, and my little sister, the writer, she goes out back. She's old enough now to open up doors and open up the gate, and she hears her like slam the gate open and go, "Boom, baby!" Because the Emperor News Groove had came out, and that was like the catch phrase for him. When you kick open the door, go "Boom, baby!" And so she just did that and just waddled on down the stairs. thought it was just the funniest thing ever, which, to be fair, it is. That's very funny. So it's much better that's the phrase she decided to latch onto, other than my youngest sister, the koala. One of the movies she liked watching a lot was Godzilla 2000, in which the phrase from that she decided to catch onto was just, "You're a pain in my A." And so that was not quite as great to get cut to of a phrase to catch onto. So for the writer, she picked a much nicer phrase to catch onto. So that's probably very good, very cute, very funny. Under this porch, we stored like the bicycles, keep them out relatively out of the snow. Rain, yeah, it worked a bit, but it's a wooden porch. Rain's going to get through the slats. But yeah, kind of under there we would have the bikes and the toys and such, and there's like a little window that went down into the basement. Technically, I suppose it's called a half basement, where you have a small window that looks out to the ground level, but this kind of half basement window under the porch was where my dad would sometimes work. Like for a while he had a computer down in this unfinished basement that he would do when he would work from home from, that he would be at and such, that he could look out of his little prison cell. And for some reason, I think it was from that window he saw when the kid got stung by the wasps and fell out of the tree. So I think that's where he was when that happened, but I could be wrong on that. And so that makes up most of the parts of the yard, with the exception of opposite side of the house from the swing set and the food dispensing system. We had another big kind of square patch of grass. Now this was the dog's poop corner, and so this obviously didn't get played in a whole lot, but it had to be cleaned a whole lot. Now, if you thought the idea of my dad with the nets for the dragonflies was cool, he's a very handy engineer, and so he built us poop scoopers. And the poop scoopers he built us were basically 2 sticks. All right, they were like maybe like 3 feet or 2 feet long. I'm not sure how long they were. And on one of the sticks, he took a tin can, a big tin can that you would use for food storage, and cut a bit of a U shape in the lip of it. And then screwed, if I remember deliberately, 3 screws, the can onto the stick. And it seemed like there was 2 of them, because I think one of them, he put the screws inside, going into the can. So they went through the wood, back of the wood, and into the can. I think this was the second one he did. The first one I think he did, he screwed from inside the can to the wood. So the screws started inside the can and then ran out through the wood. So they poked out of the back. So you had like 3 pokey screws out of the back of this. I think this was the first one he did, and then he realized that it would work better if he reversed the direction the screws were going. So that way you didn't have these pokey out screws. But, why make it again? It was still going to work, you just had to be careful. And so we had these tin cans, which eventually became very rusted, and a stick that became very dirty. And you would go around and scoop up just kind of knock the poops into this can. The U-shape cutout in the lip of the can, so that way your stick could go up inside the can, so that way you could get it all the way back in. And yeah, you would go through, scoop up with this, and then dump it into a garbage bag when you were done. And yeah, these were the poop scoopers. This is what he built, and they worked. The job was horrible, and we didn't like doing it, because, it's work, and it's gross work. If anyone's ever had to clean up dog poo, as a kid, you know how bad it could be. And I suppose I should specify this because a lot of people don't realize that the size of the dog makes a big difference. All right. This came from much, much later in life, where one of his friends at work's their kids, they thought they knew what cleaning up after a dog looked like because they had little purse dogs. Well, they were watching someone's German Shepherd or whatnot and realized that the mess the dog can leave behind could be like a handful. All right, sometimes bigger. That's quite gross to clean up. So, like I said, we had Russian Ditto, who were lab mixes. So they weren't small. They were probably a good medium-sized dog. And so cleaning up after that mess was never fun. That was kind of part of our Saturday chores, Saturday job. And I remember we were talking with our neighbor, or our mom was talking with our neighbor once through the fence. And I came up and was listening to them, and I thought I was going to say something impressive, so I said something about picking up a bunch of crap. And my mom pulled me aside. She goes, "Where did you learn that word?" It's like, "At school." She said, "Well, don't say that word. That's not a nice word." I'm like, "Okay." And I should specify, it really was crap. It wasn't the S word or anything like that. And so that's just kind of funny. That wasn't the word she liked. It was crap and freaking she didn't like. And so for a while we had a thing where if you said that, you owned everyone around you a quarter. So that was something kind of funny there that came not directly from that, but just in our house for a while. And just kind of, how things change as you get older and the stuff you can say now. So that corner didn't get played in a whole lot because of the poop mess. It got worked in a whole lot, but not played in. And that was just down a little ways from where our apple execution stump was. And so I suppose that actually ended up creating kind of the tour of our whole yard. And so with kind of just this setup, we would have a couple of adventures. We got a swing set we could play on, stuff that we could play baseball or t-ball from, trees we could climb, trees we couldn't climb, apples to eat, cherries to pick, apples to throw and squash. And so it's just kind of, it was a really fun yard. I guess as a kid, and just kind of the opportunities that we would come up with it. And there was other stuff we learned, like the only thing worse than finding a worm in your apple is finding half a worm. I remember that. I remember kind of same with the cherries. That was a gross thing that happened a couple of times, was finding bugs in the cherries. So that was nasty there. And so kind of just, I guess, the little experiences of having the fresh fruit and the problems that could come with that. Now, I made reference to this earlier, and I didn't forget about it. So we got kind of the yard set up, and there were a couple of big moments, I guess you could say, that happened in this yard. So, before we had Ditto, my brother got a different pet. He got a pygmy goat. All right. Now, this pygmy goat, he named Cutie. And I suppose it was a cute little goat. It would jump around, kind of do a little high squeak baws and such. And there were two problems with Cutie. One is that he loved my sister, the Ryder. All right, particularly he loved her hair. All right, she had like this long blonde hair, and so he absolutely adored it. Thought it was the greatest thing ever. So she was like probably like maybe 3 or so, and so he would knock her over, stand on her so she couldn't get up, and start trying to eat her hair. And she would scream and scream, and my mom would have to chase him off of her. So that was a problem that the problem of Cutie is he would try and eat the Ryder's hair. The other thing, and this I didn't like, is as he got a little older, he started to kind of grow little nubs for his horns and such. Which, the thing about goats is they like to headbutt. And so he would headbutt my shins and such. And I really didn't like this, because they would bruise and they would hurt and such. And it made me kind of scared to go out in the yard because Cutie was going to headbutt me. And I remember one evening, sitting up kind of on the backyard or whatnot. I mean, in the house looking out the back window, watching my dad out in the yard with Cutie. I think he's out in the garden. I don't know if he's trying to train him not to headbutt or what, but just watching him headbutt my dad in the shin. I think he might have had like shin guards on or something like that. So I don't know what he was trying to do there, but that's just a memory I have of that going on. Eventually we had to get rid of Cutie, not because of the hair eating or the headbutting. Although I don't think my mom was too upset that those were gone, but because animal control, driving around the neighborhood, saw Cutie in our backyard. Now, our house wasn't zoned for farm animals, so we got a big nasty complaint about this. And so we had to get rid of Cutie. Now, the thing we didn't realize were a couple of factors. One, pygmy goats aren't actually farm animals. So technically, it was legally fine for us to have Cutie. Second, we had the chain link fences all around our yard, and it was technically not legal for animal control to look through the fence and sight animals in there and such. And because that's what this animal control agent, she had done, we could have also fought it on the grounds of that. But we didn't know that at the time. And so we had to get rid of Cutie and because of some terrible animal control agent. I can't remember if it seemed like for some reason we learned a bit about this agent and that she had like a kind of history of problems or whatnot and wasn't that particularly that great of a person. So yeah, that was kind of rotten, but that's kind of how that all played out with. But it led to us getting Ditto, which went to more hosts of problems much, much later down the line. But for the time being, Ditto was a very fun dog. Now, there was one other major event that I can remember taking place in this yard. And this involves being in the poop corner. So, in our family, we like to ride motorcycles. I think I've mentioned that before. And so my dad was teaching us to ride. We had like a little 90 Yamaha. Actually, no, this wasn't a 90 Yamaha at the time. I think this was like maybe like a 90 or 50 Honda that we had that he was teaching us to ride on. And one of the things that he would teach us first is the stop and go. All right, and basically what it is when the bike was off or idling and not in gear, he would have us practice going in and hitting the brakes, where he'd just say, you're going, and brake. And so we'd have to grab the front brake and the rear brake. For those who don't ride motorcycles, your front brake is is a lever on your handlebars, typically on the right handlebar, and you would take your two fingers, your pointer and your middle finger, and you reach up, grab this lever, and pull it in towards you. All right. Your throttle or speed on the motorcycle is controlled by twisting the right handlebar. And so in some ways, this actually makes, I would say, a lot of sense, because you have to twist the handle towards you to go, or kind of rotate it down. But your brake is in the opposite direction. So in order to grab your front brake, you have to kind of let go a bit or reduce how far you can twist your throttle on the handlebar so you could grab that front brake. So that way it makes it harder to be both on the brake and the gas at the same time, at least as the front one is concerned. Now, for those who ride motorcycles, also know that your front brake isn't typically your end all be all break. In fact, if you clutch that too hard, that's how you flip over. So the real brake that you want to really get used to using is your back brake. This is controlled by, if I remember correctly, it's your right foot, right? And this is just like a little peg that you step on. That's attached to a lever, and when you step on this, it's usually like out in front of your foot. This will engage your back brake. Now this one you want to really rely on and press down on hard, because your rear wheel drives your momentum. It's where the drive is at in a motorcycle. And so seizing that up will stop you from kind of going forward, and if you just hard lock on this, you'll just kind of skid. So you're not going to flip over if you slam on your rear brake. Now, so this was something that you would practice with us, grabbing your brakes, making sure you hit them and such, so that way when you're in a panic situation you need to stop, your reflex is properly set. So that way you'll hit the brakes and not crash. Now, this was the reason. Now, this obviously very good idea. This lesson did not always stick. And I demonstrated that this lesson is harder to get stick. So basically, we're out there in the poop corner. Great place for learning to ride, because if you really don't want to fall over. I say that as a joke. It was cleaned up before we ever would ride in there in practice. And so he does the stop go with me a few times, and then we move on to the next version of that, which is you actually go for a little bit and then stop. So it's like you would ride to a cone, stop, ride to a cone, stop, that he had set out there, and then turn around and do it back. So I'm going through doing that, and something I have that may have become apparent if you've seen my writing or whatnot is dyslexia. So occasionally I get things mixed up. And I decided to act up at one of these stop cones, where instead of hitting the brakes, I gassed it more. So instead of basically going forward, easing off on the throttle to grab the brake, I did the inverse and put more gas on it, which meant that I shot forward, slammed into the chain link fence, which ended up being a good thing because it just kind of bowed out, and it just kept the gas going as I just plowed into this fence. And my dad's yelling, "Stop, stop, stop!" And I don't know how to stop, and I realized, oh, there's a kill switch, so I just hit the kill switch, which is the red button on the handlebar, and the motorcycle turns off, and I just kind of fall over or whatnot. But yeah, it bent out the fence in this huge divot, and I just charged it into it for probably maybe a good second or two before hitting the kill switch. And so kind of after that, I got really scared of riding the motorcycle, and I'm still to this day the only one in the family that doesn't really ride. So yeah, that's just kind of where that trauma came from. Was I was traumatized by our family's pastime, and now I'm the only one who doesn't do it. I do like motorcycles and think they're cool, and like to go to the Supercross and stuff. But yeah, I just don't ride. So yeah, so there's the tragedy and the other big event that happened in that yard. Funny enough, this was not the first time he would have someone that he was teaching crash through a fence. For some reason, I think it might have happened an additional 2 more times. But those are probably stories for another time. But yeah, so those were just some adventures we had in that single backyard. I wasn't sure how long that this was really going to be, because I was like, well, how many stories can I tell in one setting that happened there? Turns out it was quite a lot that would go on in there, and just the adventures we would have as little kids. But so I hope you've enjoyed this story. or these stories and kind of learning the setting of this yard. I suppose something I forgot that was really cool about this, just to kind of create the setting of it a little bit more, was there's an Air Force base near-ish where we would live, and so the pilots within the F-16 flight hours or whatnot, the point at which they would have to fly out and then turn around was right near our house, and so we would have F-16s that would quite regularly fly over our house, and so that's just always something kind of cool to look up and see. And sometimes there'd be different airplanes up there, jets and such. But yeah, so yeah, there's that final little detail I forgot about that created quite a painting there. And I suppose, going over all the stories, I really didn't talk anything about what happened in the winter there. A lot of that stuff was in the summer, but I mean, this was like kind of middle Utah, right on the Wasatch Front, so we did get plenty of snow. And this was a house, I suppose, if you remember in the Christmas story, that had the driveway that went down into the garage and up towards the road, which meant that the snow would pack up right in front of the garage, and so that was always a pain to clear. But yeah, this is also the house that my brother fell out of the tree at, when talking about my memories of him, that big old pine tree. So yeah, I guess this is more just a painting of kind of that house and that location. I probably got more stories to share about this place, but I mean, this has gone on, for a good time frame. So I suppose, I better get wrapping this up. So once again, I hope that you've enjoyed these stories in this drawing, and that you kind of got to see me using the reference drawing here. Once again, that's wenfei Silver Owl. I'll have a link into their work in the comments section if you want to check that out. And so yeah, guess this was just a whole interesting experience. The drawing, I think, came out really cool. I tried new things with it. The stories ended up being a lot more of a trip down memory lane than I was expecting. So yeah, let me know what you think about this video, because I'm feeling like that this turned out way more better and more interesting than I was expecting. But yeah, so if you want more, you could come read Gnosis. Updates Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so 3 times a week. If you feel like I've earned your support, go ahead and check out the Patreon, and either you could become a full member or just purchase this individual drawing. It is available for sale if you want it. Either way helps, and support is always welcome because it lets me keep doing this. And I hope that you have a good rest of your month. Thank you and take care.